A client comes to work with you because they don't know what to do, right? You are the expert in that space. And so the more communication you can have, the more that you kind of assuage their fears.
This is the Agency Profit Podcast, the podcast for agency owners that want to run a more profitable business that doesn't depend on them. Introducing your host, CEO and co-founder of Parakeeto, Marcel Petitpas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. I'm very excited to introduce you guys to my guest today, who was an agency owner for many years, ran a company called Develop Your Marketing before transitioning to the dark side, to the SaaS side, and starting a company called segmetrics.io, which helps people, marketers, entrepreneurs get 100% clarity on how their marketing's performing, how their spend is performing, who their best customers are, how they're behaving, all that stuff that is notoriously hard to figure out, as I know from personal experience. And he's here to share with us today some of the lessons learned from building his agency, what led him to building Segmetrics, and what he's learned from working with lots of agencies that are now customers of him using Segmetrics to better serve their clients, and essentially how we can get better at automating and streamlining the processes that we need to be good at, like communicating results to our clients so that we don't waste a ton of time doing those and stay profitable. So with all of that, I'm very excited to introduce you all to Keith Perhac. I should have asked you before we started the intro. How do I say your name?
Perhac.
Perhac. Yeah. There we go.
It's one of those last names that no one ever gets on the first time.
So I've given everyone a little bit of context on who you are and what you do, but I'd love to give you an opportunity to just share a little bit more about what Segmetrics is and how you got into that space.
Yeah, so it's like all good software solutions. It kind of came out scratching my own itch. And it was essentially like, as you said, I was an agency owner. I had been doing funnel optimization and campaign optimization for a number of digital marketers, people like Ramit Sethi, Eben Pagan, Nomadic Matt, all along that kind of vein. And as we kept growing and as we worked with different people, we realized that more and more of our time was taken on pulling numbers, right? And if you've ever worked with Infusionsoft or Drip or any of this stuff, it's all export everything into an Excel sheet, export all your revenue into Excel sheet, do a pivot, do it on whatever tag or lead source or whatever information you're looking at, and pull that data all together and then get all the data together. And then really 5 hours later, you have an answer. So it was really this huge sticking point because we hated doing it. It's not, pulling numbers was not what I got into marketing for. It's not my core competency, right? Understanding what to do with those numbers is why I got into marketing. It's what we're good at. It's why people hire us. They don't hire us to pull numbers. So we're spending all this time on something that is vitally important to the business. We have to have these numbers to be able to do our job. None of us like doing it, and it's just a huge time suck. And so we're developers by nature, and we said there has to be a better way to do this. So we built a first version internally that was essentially like, hey, can we just drop these numbers into a database and then calculate them automatically? Turns out you can.
What are some of the other reasons that client reporting and really more holistically client communication is so important for agencies, especially given the context that we're currently recording this episode in, which is what feels like the beginning of a bell curve
apocalypse
with regards to with regards to the pandemic that's going to wipe out probably not that many people, but certainly the economy.
A client comes to work with you because they don't know what to do, right? You are the expert in that space. And so the more communication you can have, the more that you kind of assuage their fears and let them know that, hey, I'm a professional and I know what they're doing. And when we talk about communication, and this is why I have never liked over communicating, I'm very particular about the communication I want, because I don't want to just be like, hey, how's it going? Or like, hey, we had a question about this. Because the more questions you ask, the more it makes them feel like, does this guy really know what he's doing? The number one thing I found working with myself with other agencies and things that we did internally was to create a process. And the stronger the communication process, the the more confidence the client has in that agency. So when I sign up with a new agency to work with them, or when someone signed up with us, they got a packet. They got a list of like, hey, go do this. Now go do this. Go do this. This is going to give us all the information for our kickoff call. We have the kickoff call. And we can even, in that first email, once they sign the contract, give them a list of everything we're going to do in that first 6 weeks, because it's a process, right? So every step is documented. Every step is part of a process, and every step has a next action so that the client never feels that, oh, what's going on next? That communication of, hey, this is what we are doing, this is how we've improved, and this is what we're doing next on a very set schedule was really the core thing that worked with clients that we worked well with. Now, it's interesting because clients we didn't work well with were the ones that we let them take control. And I think a lot of agencies talk about this a lot, where they're like, when you let the client take control of the project, that's when you start to lose two things. A, you lose control, and B, you lose that expertise. And I'm a little bit of a people pleaser, and it's something I struggle with a lot. But the issue that we came in with was we'd have a client saying like, oh no, we don't want to do that. It goes against this. I'd like to do this. And it's like, oh, we also have this page over here that I know it's not in the project scope, but could you fix it up a little? Or, hey, I know this isn't in the project. And suddenly we're a development shop instead of a marketing. And it was so interesting. We worked with this great client, absolutely loved working with them, but we weren't forceful enough. And we eventually became just a dev shop into doing what they wanted us to do. And they eventually stopped working with us. And on our offboarding call, I was like, what could we have done better? And he sat down with me and he said, I really wanted you to tell us what to do and to take control. I was like, you wanted us to do all these things? He's like, I really wanted you to push back on that.
Hey, it's Marcel here, and I just want to take a quick second to thank you for tuning into the show. I hope you're getting so much value out of today's episode, and if you are, then I want to encourage you to head on over to parakeeto.com, where you can get access to even more great resources to help you run a more profitable agency, like additional episodes of the show, blog posts detailing the things we talk about, as well as lots of free downloadable checklists, spreadsheet templates, and other resources, all designed to help you run a more profitable agency. So with that, hope you enjoy the rest of the episode, and I'll let you get back to it. It's probably best for everyone if that communication cadence is good, if you're clearly showing them the value that you're offering. But of course, the only way for that to really be good and exciting for you as an agency is for the process to not be laborious and painstaking, right. Which of course is the catch-22 of this whole thing.
Right. And this is, I really feel that I know certain businesses have to cut corners, but if you are an agency providing real value, especially in the online space, it's actually harmful to cut you, because if you could keep revenue the same or keep it from tanking, then that you are paying for your own agency fee right there. And that's the value you need to show. And that's what we always tried to show with our funnel optimizations, is that, look, here's what we did this last month. Here's where you would have been without us, and here's where you are with us. We're only taking 5% of all the improvements that we've made. So we're definitely worth keeping on here.
So then the next question then becomes, I think this is where you can add a lot of value. How should agencies think about setting up a process for communicating with clients that's going to be efficient and, streamlined and not take up a ton of their time?
What I like to do is, depending on how much the client is paying me, to create a cadence of a weekly call and maybe a weekly email that goes up that updates them on where the stats are. So essentially, let's say Thursday, we send out, hey, here's the weekly email with all the stats. Let's discuss it on our call on Friday. It may be slower, it may be faster. And then every 6 weeks, we have a kind of catch-up call, right? Which is, hey, here's all the things we've done in the last 6 weeks. Now let's plan out the next 6 weeks. And this is very important because it sets up an expectation of what we're going to do next. Right? So that there's never a stop in the work of, oh, we're done. All right. Right? So, and you don't want to have that 6 weeks when you're finished with everything. You're like, okay, we have a week left of the current projects. Now let's talk about what we're going to do for the next. And I do it on 6 weeks because our contracts are 4 weeks. Right? So making sure that everything is staggered so that there's never a point where people can say, okay, everything's done and off the panel, let's stop working.
So I think this is where a lot of agencies struggle, is they think about the process of making things more efficient. A communication system is one example of that. And they think there's just too much nuance here. It's just too hard to automate or streamline this. How should they be thinking about automating or streamlining the things that feel like they might be really hard to automate or streamline it? And what are kind of the core tenets of going down that path?
What I have always worked on is, first, never try to use software to automate the first time around. It is such a bad idea because for a number of reasons. First of all, if you're building it yourself, it's going to be way too complex. It's going to take a lot of time, and then you have to support it forever. The second one is, if there are holes, you're not going to see the holes because you haven't done it yourself yet. So the number one thing we do when we're optimizing for this kind of stuff is we create a paper or a checklist SOP, and we say, these are the things we're doing. These are the things we want to do. And then the important thing is we give it to someone else, not me. And they're going to have questions and feedback and say like, hey, why are we doing this? Or like, why can't we just do it this way? Someone who's never touched it before is going to have a lot more visibility into some of the stupid things or the ineffective things that I've been doing this entire time and not realize it just because that's the way I do it. You also, when you give it to someone else, realize the number of things that you were doing that were kind of like hacks or just small little things that really didn't need to be done, that need to be automated, and you can kind of improve it on that way. So what we do, as I was saying, we do everything manually first. And once we have it down so that anyone on the team could pick up that SOP and do it, that's when we say, okay, all of this stuff is automatable through software.
So I love that approach of getting somebody with no context to pick it up, and that's kind of the test, is can they do it and can they get the same kind of outcome that you expect?
Yep. Also, it's really good to have someone, if you're a person like me who isn't good at delegating, who just like, oh, it's faster for me to do it myself, getting someone to yell at you until you delegate it is a great strategy. I literally have someone on my team who, not her only job, but she'll come up to me and say, Keith, why are you still doing this? Why is someone else on the team not doing it? Stop doing that. Give it to Michael. Go do other things that are more valuable.
What final piece of advice do you have for those agencies, especially considering the state that the world's in right now, that just want to get a little bit more efficient and want to build better relationships with their clients and make sure they're building more value into the relationship with their clients?
I think this is advice for all the time. I think it's especially important now, is to work on the business and to improve and to take that time to really focus on, first, improving that communication. Build a process for getting reports out, build a process for collecting the data. You're going to see a decline in revenue. That's pretty much a given at this point. Don't panic. Take that extra time in order to make the business stronger. Now is the time. And I think now is the time to improve those processes to show that value, because you're not going to have tons of people coming to you in the next probably 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, maybe longer. But you can continue to prove that you have great value to your existing clients, and you can build better processes so that when it is time, you're going to be at the top of the pack because you're going to be prepared.
I think that's sound advice to close on. So with all of that, Keith, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And for those that are listening that want to follow what you're doing at Segmetrics and follow the content that you're producing, where can they find you on the World Wide Web?
Most of my stuff is on Segmetrics. We run a blog and interview series called Data Beats Opinion, where we talk to agency owners and product owners about how they're using data to improve their marketing and funnels. I think that's really interesting. Check that out. You can also find me on Twitter. My name's Keith Perhac. That's not my Twitter handle, but I'm the only Keith Perhac in the world, so I'm pretty easy to find. That's both a blessing and a curse.
Awesome. So there you have it, folks. In the show notes, you know where to find it. We'll make sure we link all of that stuff up. And with that, we hope that you enjoyed the show. Leave us a comment wherever you listen to this. Let us know what you got from it. Let us know if you have any questions. Smash that like button, subscribe.
Hit the bell.
Yeah, that's it. All that stuff. And we hope you'll join us on the next episode. And once again, Keith Perhac, thanks for being here on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers. Well, that's all for today's episode of the Agency Profit Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, make sure you subscribe so you never miss another episode. And make sure you head on over to Parakeeto.com to get access to lots of other great resources to help you run a more profitable agency. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode.